Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. This week's guest, the very funny Brian Sack. We'll catch up with the former Blaze personality, see what he's up to in just a moment. Well, it is tax season, and the team over at American Pride Roasters Coffee, they're remembering the first Treasury Secretary and the Vice President who killed him. Remember that historic duel back on that July morning in 1804? Yes, Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. While Burr beat both murder and treason charges, he didn't escape having a tasty APR coffee blend named after him. The Burr Hamilton. It's made from Central and South American coffee beans with a special blend of blueberry and donut flavors. It's a terrific dessert coffee, but also a great companion to your favorite pastry breakfast. And please note the ATM promo code, that's changed as a tax season special. If you order at least 2 pounds of coffee over at aprcoffee.com, you type in ATM in the special instructions section during checkout, and you're going to receive a free 8-ounce bag of the Reagan, a Time for Choosing blend, a $10 value. So get over to aprcoffee.com, take advantage of this yummy offer today.
You're listening to At the Mic with Keith, an independent podcast production.
Today's guest is Brian Sack. Brian is a former Blaze TV personality, improv actor, book author, and co-host of the podcast Questionable Material. Brian tells us some memorable, if unflattering, stories about a couple of popular musicians. He tells us about his previous life as an animal rights activist and what one item in your house says about you. Without further delay, here's this episode of At the Mic with prolific world traveler Brian Sack. Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Hi, Keith. How are you?
I am so good. Actually, I'm great because I've been looking forward to this. You and I tried to schedule this interview for months, literally, but yours truly, of course, came down with COVID and lost my voice, and here we are. I'm glad we could finally make time, so thank you, sir.
It was a long time in the making.
It was. So you are not only, a comedian and a podcaster, but also a book author. I highly recommend The United States versus Santa Claus if you're looking for a fun book. Great job with that. Have you written anything else besides that? Because that's the only book that I'm familiar with of yours.
Well, darn. Yeah, I have. I wrote in 2008, I had a book called In the Event of My Untimely Demise, which was tongue-in-cheek advice for my son. 2 years later, the BS of a primer in politics for the incredibly disenchanted.
My goodness, I have got a lot of catch-up reading to do. I'm so sorry. How embarrassing.
That's what I mean. The BS of A now is kind of dated because it was referring to politics back in, 9 years ago. So.
Oh, the good old days,
the good old days.
Things were so much simpler 9 years ago.
I don't know. I mean, the title was, Primer in Politics for the Incredibly Disenchanted. So I guess things weren't going that great then either.
That's a fair point. Nowadays, you and your buddy, Jack Helmuth, you guys are still together doing stuff. In fact, you've got your own podcast, Questionable Material, which is very funny, qmpodcast.com for anyone who wants to check that out. QM for Questionable Material. Funny how that worked out.
I know, right?
Podcast.com. How far back do you guys go, you and Jack?
Jack and I met for the first time when I was looking for a producer for the BS of A, which was the show I had on the Blaze in the very early years of the Blaze. So 2011 is when the show launched. So that's when I met Jack. Somebody said, I have a great person I'd like you to meet. I think you guys would hit it off. And so we met at an Irish pub in New York, and he's not much of a drinker. And he tells the story, like, I met him, we interviewed and talked, and I convinced him to drink more wine than he was capable of drinking. And then he stumbled home and bought a McFlurry, and that didn't help things. And so he had an unpleasant evening. But that was our first meeting. So that was 2011, probably in the early fall of 2011.
Okay. I'm glad you guys are still creating comedy together. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about Questionable Material. And I mean this as a compliment because I can never tell with you guys, or any of your stuff, really, if you're doing improv or if it's scripted or if it's partially scripted. And so I wasn't surprised when I was reading the email that you sent back to me where I ask all the questions and stuff ahead of time. I wasn't surprised that a big part of your background is improv comedy. And so that kind of stood out to me. And I thought, see, I can't tell. So please tell me, what percentage of what you do is scripted and what is improv?
For for questionable material, it's not. I mean, the only thing that would be conceivably scripted would be the cold open. Like I try to do. We'll do like a comedy bit at the beginning,
right?
A fake commercial. But the podcast itself is generally improvised. Right now, we've kind of fallen into the rhythm where when we start the recording, I answer his Skype call with some kind of pretend business name or something, and then he just kind of he works on it from there. And we, there are bits like news you missed, which is the news you missed during the news cycle that I found, and those are stories I've written, in advance. But in general, it's mostly improvised.
I mean, I can't imagine. That's got to be tough, huh?
Improv was something that I was always fascinated by, and I started doing long before it was trendy, and you had to actually really explain to people what you were doing. So, 91, I think, was the first time I saw an improv show, and I was like, oh my God, I love this. And I wound up eventually auditioning for that group that I had seen and got into that, and I did that for 10 years with them. And yeah, it was, when you're in a good group with people you really work with who have, and you're all kind of on the same comedic wavelength, and you know how to set each other up and what to expect from that person if you deliver them some kind of a line. It can be really, really awesome. And actually, we had shows where afterward people would come up and say, there's no way that was improvised. You guys scripted it, please. And that was the best compliment, because it really meant kidding. It was just kind of like, no, we made it all up. Like I still have memories of shows and songs and things. And we had a really solid group. And we had Gary Anthony Williams, who's one of the most talented improv performers ever and a good friend of mine. And he's out in LA now. And he's been on tons of shows, Boston Legal. He does a voiceover for Boondocks. He's been, and just extremely funny. And we do magical shows. And actually our keyboardist was in a band from the 70s called Starbuck. Huh. And they had a hit song called Moonlight Feels Right. And I don't know if you know that song with but it's like it's a very classic song from the 70s. And he was our improv keyboardist, and he was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good show.
Great.
I missed that.
I never thought of that. I never thought of like having to be an improv keyboardist at the show, but that must be exactly whose line is it anyway? In a way, yeah. Right.
I mean, yeah, because we'd always do stuff like, okay, we're going to do a song. What's the song about? It's like, the Georgia Route 400. Okay, and what style do you want the song? Country. Okay. And then, because Gary's black, people would always be like, and with a rap chorus, like they'd always want Gary to rap, and he was a phenomenal rap. I mean, he's amazing. And then Sloan, who was the keyboardist, would just put together this amazing song that was a country song with a rap chorus. And, we had the audience, holding up their lighters to singing a song about the Georgia Route 400.
That's great. That's awesome. So does Jack have a background in improv as well, or is that just something he's developed with you?
We have a good comedic rapport, and he knows he really knows how to get stuff out of me. And,
right.
And he's very good at predicting where I'm going to go. But it's actually very funny, like, because when we're recording stuff and I'll see him, see his face, and I can see him getting super excited when I'm going in a direction that either he knew I was going to go in, or completely takes him by surprise. He's like a little kid. He gets all, giddy. But
it's great.
We have a good rapport. Like we just, and actually, when he called me on the phone, for years, we would do these comedy routines where he'd call me and I'd answer the phone with some fake thing. And then at one point we're like, why don't we record this instead of just wasting it? And now we've gotten to the point where we don't even talk on the phone anymore, because it'll be like, well, just save it for the podcast.
You know what? Hold on. Everything you're describing feels like Pat and I produced Pat Gray Unleashed on The Blaze. And I feel like as you're describing this, I'm kind of Jack to Pat, like I'm trying to set him up because I know how he's going to respond.
Yeah.
And right down to where you said, save it for the podcast. He and I'll start, babbling during the commercial breaks. And it's almost like we're getting into a bit or, like a routine here. I was like, whoa. And one of us will say, oh, let's just save it till we come back,
Yeah.
And then see where it goes from there. Exactly.
Because it's like, well, why waste this between you and I when, we could put it on a podcast. Yeah,
everyone needs to check out QM, stands for questionable material, qmpodcast.com. Check it out. Two very funny guys.
And it's on all the platforms, Apple and
everywhere.
Google and iHeartRadio and whatever's.
Very good. Awesome. So you were born in New York City.
Yep.
But you were kind of grew up, though, in Massachusetts, correct?
Yes. I was born in New York, and then because my father was working in the city, but we lived in White Plains, which is kind of outside of the city. It's like a bedroom community. And then he moved to the South Shore of Massachusetts, so south of Boston, near Plymouth, where the Pilgrims came.
Oh, wow. So how old were you when you moved?
Oh, probably 1 or 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, most of my growing up was done in this small town.
How did you end up back in New York?
I went to school in upstate New York for college, and most of my friends moved to the city. And at the time, the city had been kind of decimated. It was kind of crime ridden. You expected to be mugged. When you went to the ATM kind of, and I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. And so I wound up going down to Atlanta, and I was down in Atlanta from 91 to 2001.
Wow. That's where I was born and raised. So we were there at the same time. What part of town were you in?
I lived, at first I lived in Dunwoody, which is north of the city, and then moved into the Virginia Highlands.
Okay.
Which was, it was kind of, I wouldn't say walkable, but it was like a little neighborhood with, they had bars and restaurants, and it was good for somebody in their 20s. And so I lived in I lived in like a rental condo, and then somebody's house that was partitioned, and then eventually bought a house near the Virginia Highlands. Yeah, I spent a good 10 years there. But I had met my wife, or she at the time she was my girlfriend, but she was I'd met her in Paris in an Irish pub, and there's a theme, and she's Polish. And she's Polish. And so, and I had my company, and I was working in Atlanta, and I had wanted to move to New York for years, and I had kept talking about it and just never, I kind of had a footing there in Atlanta. I had this business with another partner, and my wife, or not at the time, girlfriend, was visiting from France and staying longer and longer periods of time. And then at some point, I came home from work, and she's just sitting there. I'm like, what's the matter? And she's like, I feel like a bird in a golden cage. And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, it's nice, that we're just sitting in this house. It's nice, but like, I'm bored. Like, Atlanta's boring to me. I want to move. And, I in fairness, I had taken her from Paris. I mean, she lived in Paris, France, and it's a phenomenal city. And then to bring her from Paris to Atlanta, it's not the same.
Yep. That would make sense.
She didn't really enjoy driving anywhere. And so she was just kind of, sitting there waiting for me to come home from work.
But how did you get to Atlanta to begin with? How did that happen?
I went down there for an internship at an ad agency because I really didn't know I wasn't quite sure what I wanted, what to do with myself. And I knew somebody who had contacted an ad agency, and I figured, I contacted them, and I went down and I said, I just need to figure out, what I want to do. I knew it was kind of writing related or something creative. Most of my friends, they came to the city and were doing stand-up comedy and improv and things like that. And I just wound up at an ad agency, and I happened to be good at writing, especially radio. And so I kind of found my groove there, and I enjoyed writing radio commercials. They were kind of like mini screenplays. They were like minute-long screenplays. And a lot of the other writers I got hired not too long afterwards, because the owner of the ad agency liked me and liked my writing style. And so I wound up getting hired for not a lot of money. I remember when he told me he was going to hire me, and I got all excited, and then he told me what he was going to pay me. And he's like, what's that face about? What's that frowny face? And I was like, well, I just kind of thought it would be more, especially compared to my friends in New York who were making a lot more money. But of course, their cost of living was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
as you probably well know now,
oh God, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous and gets more ridiculous by the day. And now that the city's broke, it's going to get even worse. You can see that, the meter maids out there ticketing every parked car they can. And I mean, they're doing everything they can in this town to raise money. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in Massachusetts.
Yep.
I'm sorry to jump around here. It's my own fault, but you grew up in Massachusetts. You have two younger brothers. How much younger are they?
About 4 years difference, and then 4 and 7, I guess, years difference.
Are you close to your brothers? Were you as a kid or?
No, not really. I mean, we're just typical family. My mother was sick. She had breast cancer and was sick for 4 years before she died. So, I mean, I think that screwed things up. It certainly didn't help. When she died, I was 13, just about to turn 14.
Goodness, Brian, I can't imagine. So that.
Well, you see it coming. I mean, you kind of, I had a 4-year heads up.
When your mom passed, it probably changed the dynamic in the family. I'm going to have to make assumptions here. I apologize. But it seems like a dad with 3 young sons, I mean, the oldest being 13, that had to be tough.
Oh, yeah, for him, it was an absolute mess, I'm sure. Yeah, but especially because, he was the breadwinner. He was his focus was work. And, now he was kind of a parent and a breadwinner. I mean, I've got 2 teens now, and I can't trying to imagine doing that on my own.
Yeah, right. And how old are your children right now? 16
and 13, about to turn 14, which is hard for me to believe. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, time, it just flies by, right?
It really does.
Being that you're in the city, does the 16-year-old drive or want to drive, or how does that work?
He does. Yeah, he got his permit the day after he turned 16. We marched right over to the DMV, got his permit. He actually, he was driving yesterday, and I was such a terrible driver that I'm really happy that he's a good, just kind of chill driver. I was a mess.
That's my hope too for my kids. I'm a terrible driver. I've always been a terrible driver. My oldest doesn't have any interest in driving, and she's about to hit 18.
Really? But you live in Texas, right?
We live way out. Yeah, we live out of the metro. I mean, we're on the edges of what you would consider the metro area. But everything, her friends drive, and everything is pretty close, so kind of works out. But my son is chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's ready to go. He could have already had his learner's permit if not for COVID. And so that's really set him back, but I can't imagine not wanting to drive from day one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I had a calendar specifically devoted to just counting down the days till I could drive.
I was so incredibly bored growing up. Like, this town was small, and it was rural, and I was bored, and I could not wait to get my license. And when I did get my license, I was so excited. I just drove, and I got on I saw people hitchhiking, and I pulled over.
Come on.
People were hitchhiking, and I pulled over. It was like 3 guys, and I pulled over, and they said they were going to Plymouth. And I was probably about 30 to 40 minutes from Plymouth. And I was like, sure. And I drove them. I mean, it was insane, but I was so eager to just get out and drive.
Wow. So did you meet interesting people? Did you have any regrets from picking up randos on the freeway?
That's the only time I pick people up. If I, but from that point on, I was just driving everywhere, just aimlessly, just to get out of the house.
Sure. Yeah. I totally understand. Now, when you were a kid, you're growing up, finally get to drive. And during that time, had you already determined what you wanted to do for a living, something with comedy, or did that come later?
I always had a creative bent, and I was always I was making 8mm movies with this camera that my father had, and then eventually videos when he got a video cassette recorder thing back, these giant camera things that were attached to a VCR. And I don't people don't remember. I mean, some, especially the kids have no idea. I was walking around with this giant, VCR backpack connected to a huge camera that took really bad video,
Right. Well,
and now my wife's phone is so amazing. It's like, I'm so jealous. Like if I had that growing up.
So I don't remember the backpack cameras. I thought you were describing the video cameras that just basically would just dig into your shoulder that you would have to carry around. And I have not seen, I need to do some Googling. I got to go see the backpack video camera.
It was a Betamax deck, and you would basically, press the 2 sides and slide out the cassette part that holds the cassette and all the recording stuff. And it was on a sling, and you just kind of throw that over your shoulder, and that was connected to a wire that was connected to the camera. That took really bad video. Like, the quality is so bad.
Totally not worth it, right?
Yeah, but at the time you're just like, this is amazing.
And so you and a friend, if I understand, actually recorded like a talk show together with that equipment, correct?
Yeah, and in fact, that was my first foray into doing improv. My friend Dave and I we had a camera, and we had a show we called Rat Piss. and it was a talk show, and we had the crappy graphics that you had back in those days. On the camera, you had the very basic graphics, and it would flash like rat piss. And then we just improvise characters and interview one another, and and make silly videos. And then my grandmother would walk in the background, like, what are you doing? Stop it, Dave. Just like, so I have all this great material with her in the background.
That's awesome. Yeah, friends of mine and we would record, and basically it was a ripoff of Saturday Night Live. We just called it Friday Night Taped. And we just did a bunch of bits like that. We just basically impersonated characters from SNL.
Oh, okay.
But I tell you, man, you turn a teenager loose with a creative mind and a video camera.
Yeah.
Who knows? But if I find those tapes, I might have to burn them at this point.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they only exist in like my attic. It's not like I put them on. There was no YouTube. Maybe I would have been a YouTube celeb, but
you could have. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're born in the wrong time, Brian.
I can't be a YouTube celeb now. Too old.
You've had a number of jobs throughout your life. We've covered some of them here, but I could actually see you as a waiter. Like, I could see you doing a great job, getting big tips, making people laugh. Was that not your experience?
You would be incorrect.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I was a good waiter in some ways, but also just kind of clumsy. I remember dumping an entire tray of ice water down a guy's back, and he was not happy, and I did not get a good tip.
Oh, no.
I was especially when I was, 18, 19, 20, like I was very good at charming older women. Mm-hmm. Especially, I would card them.
There you go. Good plan. Nice job.
They loved me. I would, may I see some ID, please? Are you kidding me? No, I'm sorry. I just can't tell. Oh, bless you. I love. And then, I mean, after that, 20, 25, 30% tip.
What did I tell you?
Yeah.
I knew you would be good at this.
Certain things.
Awesome.
It was, and it was fun. I met some of my best friends when I was working waiting tables, and a bunch of guys from Ireland. I wound up becoming friendly with them and just really enjoying their company. And I'm still in touch with them and see them every once in a while.
Now, I asked if you had any hobbies, and you said you're mediocre at carpentry.
Yep.
What's the item that you've built that you're most proud of?
My COVID project this summer was a table for my Big Green Egg, the barbecue. It's that Komodo grill or Kamado grill. And I built, and I'm actually it came out really nice, and I'm very happy with it. That's the biggest project I've ever done. And it's where I finally used the techniques I've been like routing, which is something I never knew existed until a couple of years ago. Pocket holes. I'm learning. It's funny because my business partner in Atlanta was a carpenter. He was amazing. And we built our recording studio, and I had no idea how difficult it would be. But like he just, we'll just build the studio out and save a lot of money. But he was fantastic. he would like wander off and then come back with a bookshelf, He'd look at something, he'd measure it. He's like, and then he'd come back, and suddenly there was like a cubby that was nicely designed and put together.
I am so jealous of anybody with that skill, because I am the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I would end up just chopping off a digit or two. Me with power tools. I mean, it's documented on my Twitter timeline, some of the injuries I've caused myself.
Yeah, I heard you talking to Brad Staggs about him. I think he lost a piece of his finger from power tools.
Yeah, but see, he can build stuff. I mean, there's stuff in my house that I've purchased from Brad Staggs that he has built. I mean, he has got talent. You talk about building studios. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. His background, he's been building stuff his entire life. I'm lucky if, and I'm not being facetious at all. I'm lucky if over the course of using a power tool, I don't injure myself in some way, to the point where my kids are like, you know what, Dad, I got this.
Oh,
No,
wow.
I got this, Dad. Yeah. But anyhow, so kudos to you. Maybe you can keep building on that skill. You know, Brad Staggs actually wrote a book that
did
you
he?
could pick up at some point too.
Oh, I'll check that out then.
Yeah.
I'm actually pretty clumsy, and so I'm very careful when I'm using something like the table saw or the chop saw. I have one of my best friends who does a lot of building and stuff. I mean, he chopped a finger off or a tip of his finger off accidentally, but he was also doing everything wrong. Like he had his chop saw on the floor. You know, you don't do that. He kind of fell forward. He fell forward as he was cutting. But I'm careful. But I do have tools that could kill me if I'm not paying attention. I wear my goggles and my gloves, and you know I'm safe.
Good.
Knock on wood. I'm going to
That's
say
good.
that, and then next time you talk to me, I'll be missing a limb.
So tell us about you've got a kitty cat.
I do.
And it's Mochi. Right?
Mochi, yeah, which is a
And-
Japanese dessert.
Oh, don't eat your kitty cat. Come on.
No.
Man. So recently had a brain tumor removed. Young cat.
Yep.
How did y'all know that was what was going on?
Well, she started acting weird. So if you have a cat, you know that when they start hiding, that's a bad sign. And so suddenly she was hiding underneath the sofa kind of all day, which is very abnormal behavior. And then we noticed that she was constantly walking to the left. She would just kind of walk, and then it looked like her movement was impaired and almost stroke-like, where half of her body was kind of just not working right. And so we took her in, and I think they misdiagnosed her the first time and said maybe she had a tooth infection. So we had some dental work done.
Oh,
and then that didn't fix the issue. And then they said, well, you know, it could be something else. And they gave her some antibiotics and this, and that didn't fix the issue. And then he said, oh, I'm kind of concerned it might be something to do with the brain. And so we had to get an MRI, which I didn't even know they did for cats. And when they came back, they said, the cat has a tumor that's taking up 1/3 of her cranium. And they showed me the picture, and it was pushing her brain. So there's this blob, and it's basically pushing her brain to the side. And I said, yeah. And it was one of these things where, well, what do we do about that? He's like, well, you have two choices. You can do brain surgery, or you can do hospice, you know, end of life care. We can give medications, and she won't last, you know, it'll be a few weeks. I mean, this is terminal. And, you know, it being 2020 and my kids being like, no, don't let her die. You know, we thought about it. And my older son, who had bought a couple of shares of Tesla back when it was very low, he basically was like, I've got some money I can contribute. And I'm like, okay. And so I just didn't want 2020 to get another victim. Right. So we wound up opting for the brain surgery, and it was insane. I mean, but man, she's completely normal now.
That's great.
It's kind of amazing. She's about 7.
Okay. Very good.
And you'd never know.
Oh, that's really great to hear. See, I am an animal lover. I'm a pushover for animals. Yeah. And so when someone tells a story like this about, you know, they had an animal that was, like in her situation, very, very sick, I don't blame them, no matter how much money they end up spending. And I'm not going to ask, because it doesn't matter, honestly, because if I were in that position, I don't know what I would do. I might go into debt to save. I love my dogs. And I've actually, my entire life until recently, I was a cat person. I had a cat for 17 and a half years. It broke my heart when she died recently. You get so attached to them, and they are literally a part of your family. It's not just some throwaway line, oh, you're a part of the family. I mean, seriously, you spend years walking from room to room with this shadow, and all of a sudden, the prospects of them not being there, tell me where to sign, Doc. Seriously.
Yeah, I had a cat, Omar, that I named after Omar Bradley. And I had him for 17-something years, from, you know, dating back to Atlanta. And when he started to go, I mean, and he was a dog cat. Like he followed me around. He was my buddy, as opposed to Mochi, who wants nothing to do with me. Like she's like, nope, not interested.
Have you explained to her that you saved her life though?
Oh, she's not the brightest. She really, I can tell that she's just not. Like Omar was a Maine Coon, and it was just a cool cat. He was very dog-like, and Mochi's just this timid little kitty. I mean, she's a cute little thing, and she loves the 16-year-old, but really wants nothing to do with me. But when Omar got sick, I did everything I could to keep him alive. And we had this ridiculous regimen where I was sticking him with a needle twice a day. And then at some point he's just like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go die in the shower, which is what they do. They kind of wander off and then they just kind of sit there. They want to be alone. Yeah. They don't want an audience. Yeah,
animals know.
Yep, they do.
I didn't even connect the two when you just said Mochi loves the 16-year-old. Is the 16-year-old when you said, one of my sons had bought Tesla stock? Well, first of all, how cool is that? Are you saying that your sons invested money into the stock market?
Yeah, I thought I wanted to do something educational, and I thought, okay, I opened 2 brokerage accounts, and I just put some money in it, not a lot, and I just said, here, you can pick a stock. Or whatever you can. I'm not going to judge you on the stock. I'm not going to give you advice. I just want to see what you guys do. And some of the 16-year-old bought like 2 shares or 3 shares of Tesla, but it was much cheap. It was very cheap. I mean, his portfolio is up 1,000%. I couldn't believe it.
That is awesome.
I could not believe. And how
old were they when you gave them this opportunity?
It was a year ago.
Okay.
So it was December 2019. So in 1 year, his portfolio was up over 1,000%. And then the other one, it was hilarious. Like the 13-year-old, I woke him up in the morning for school and he goes, "Oh, Dad, last night after you put me to bed, I actually got up and I bought a share of United Airlines."
That's fun right there. You have given me an idea. I've been writing this down because I'm doing that with my kids. That's fun.
The only thing, now I'm kind of worried. It's like, I don't want him to think, the 16-year-old to think that it's that easy to get that kind of return on investment, because I certainly, first of all, I would have told him not to buy Tesla if he had asked me, because I don't know. It didn't seem like, I can't believe how amazingly the stock has done. But I would have advised him against it. So, I mean, I'll just keep my mouth shut at this point.
Well, maybe you should have him pick your stocks now.
No, I'm actually, I watch now what they do. And he bought a couple of shares of JetBlue. And I was like, well, why are you buying JetBlue? Nobody's traveling. He's like, yeah, but they will. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And they will learn a lesson one way or the other, right?
I think so.
They'll know they're doing it right, or they'll know what they did wrong.
Yeah, well, when I first started investing, which was early 90s, my thing was like I only would buy what I knew, and which was a Warren Buffett thing. Like he never got involved in the tech stuff in the 90s, and people asked him, "Why aren't you investing in tech?" And he's like, "Because I don't understand it." He goes, I buy what I understand. And so at the time, I bought Starbucks very early. And the reason I bought Starbucks was because I was working in an office building. I was going downstairs every day and I was spending, $3 or $4 on a mocha. That was my, when, the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, droopy eyelids hit, every time I got tired, that I'd go downstairs and buy my mocha. And then at some point I realized, like, this is a company that, I use every single day I'm at work, and they seem to be doing a good job. And I bought Starbucks stock.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Is history.
Yeah, very good. Okay. So your favorite music genre is the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a child of the 80s.
Yeah, well, I am too. I just recently had an epiphany, just personally speaking, that, boy, I loved the 80s, but didn't care for the music or the style of clothes.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there are some bands from the 80s that I really like. But other than that, I don't know, too many keyboards. So
it's funny you say that, because the 16-year-old just bought a keytar.
Uh-oh.
He spent his entire summer savings. He was working a job at a landscaping place this summer. And he's like, "Dad, I want to get a keytar." And I was like, "What, are you starting a synth band?" He's like, "No, I just really want a keytar." And we looked him up, and he went and he plunked down pretty much all of his summer money on this keytar.
Well, I hope that pays off.
Hilarious. It's hilarious. It's like,
does he walk around the house playing it?
So he's into 80s music, which is really funny, because he and I have the same taste in music.
So who's your favorite band from that era?
I mean, the most influential was probably the Smiths.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
see, that's one of those bands I love from that era. Yeah.
I mean, I became a vegetarian and because of the Smiths, and I just I like the mopey. He very smart lyrics, but
yeah, me too.
He's very clever.
So I wonder how many people became vegetarians because of Morrissey.
I'm sure a lot. I mean, I got better over time. Like I realized I missed steak and bacon and things like that, and it didn't stick. But at the time, it really turned me. I was an annoying animal rights advocate. I was going around my college putting up posters of animals being tested on. They're very graphic.
Oh, wow. That was you, huh?
That was me. I was a member of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which is a crazy organization. Yeah, I was a card-carrying member of PETA.
Oh my!
But it actually,
what years are we talking about?
Oh, this was 86 to 90.
Okay.
So
and what did you do to annoy people?
I was. It's funny. A friend of mine from college just sent me a letter I had written to the school newspaper in 87 or 88 about animal testing. And I'd constantly write letters to the editor to the school newspaper. I would put up posters. I would hover over people, my friends who were eating hamburgers and be like, "Oh, do you know where that beef?" I was annoying. I was a kind of a one of these annoying activist types, which is good now because now I understand how these people work. So when I see I know how their brains work, and there's a certain level of brainwashing because at the time I was 100% convinced that there was absolutely no benefit from animal testing because I had been told that by People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I know now that, certainly I don't think you should test cosmetics on bunny eyes and stuff like that. But I mean, I was convinced, and this is coming from somebody whose mom died of cancer. And I was convinced you shouldn't do any kind of cancer testing on monkeys or anything like that. Wow. I was, very adamant about it. So I understand how these people function and how they're able to tune out things they don't want to hear or know.
It appears that you're a pretty voracious reader, correct?
Yeah, I read a lot. Not as much as I used to. I think there's so many distractions now. It takes me longer to get through books.
Well, explain this, because I've had this conversation recently with my oldest daughter, the 17-year-old, almost 18, and she is an avid reader. She's a quick reader, and you see a different book in her hand every few days, and you realize, my goodness, you're not jumping around books. You're moving on to the next one. But in this age of smartphones, which I think is what you might be alluding to, I see her playing stupid games more often than I like, I don't know, Fruit Ninja and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like some Harry Potter game on her phone. I don't know. I'm raising 3 Harry Potter freaks. Thank the wife for that one. So it just kind of bugs me a little bit. I'm like, where are those books? Is that kind of what you're talking about as far as distractions, or am I on the wrong track here?
Yeah, no, it's true. You start reading a book and then, you get a text message. And then from the text message, you go, I want to check something. And then you check something. And then from that, you wind up on a different website. And then before you know it, it's like, I had that book, but now I can't read it because I need to leave. I'm trying to be more disciplined where I just say, okay, I'm going to take, 30 minutes, an hour. I'm going to sit down and turn everything off. And I'm just going to read my book. But yeah, there's just too many.
That's actually very smart. And it's so simple, but yet it never occurred to me until this moment in time. When I'm reading, put the phone, turn it off.
Yeah.
So you can't even hear it vibrate or see the notification.
Airplane mode,
airplane mode.
But yeah, when I was commuting to World Trade Center 4 for a year, and I would use the subway time to read, and I always would look at people playing like Candy Crush and think like, God, it's such wasted time.
Totally.
You could be reading the news or anything. And it was always nice to see somebody reading a book, especially if what I dislike about Kindles is you can't see what somebody's reading. So I like to, you can actually, you get to know somebody if you see what they're reading. And I see people on the subway with a book. I'll be, oh yeah, what do you think about that book? Or blah, blah, blah. Have you read his other book? And you don't get that with Kindles. Same when you go to
before you know it, that guy who you thought was just striking up a friendly conversation is asking you about, what they do to animals when they test them.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what's in that burrito?
No, but make your point. That's very interesting. Yeah, you learn a lot about a person based on what literature they've got in their lap.
Well, that's the thing, with bookshelves. the Kindle kind of has ruined the bookshelf because you used to go to somebody's apartment and you kind of get an idea of what interests them. You can get an idea of maybe where they are politically, whatever, and what their points of interest are. And you don't get that with Kindles.
That's a great point.
If you come into my living room and you look at the bookshelf, you can tell I'm definitely into World War II. I'm definitely into North Korea, the Soviet Union gulags. And then you can see my wife is clearly a cook because, we have 300,000 cookbooks and you can tell she speaks French and Polish. It's just, you can form opinions about people and kind of get to know them.
That is very interesting that you say that because there's a relative of mine who is far left. Mm-hmm. And I was so stunned. It's a relative that lives far away. I've only been to this house one time, but I know this individual well enough to know far left tendencies, very liberal. And I was very surprised when I saw on his bookshelf a book by Judge Robert Bork, Slouching Towards Gomorrah. Uh-huh. And I thought, that does not compute. It does not compute at all. And talking to him over the years, I have realized he's much more centrist than I first realized. Uh-huh. He's not as liberal as I felt he was early on. And what the tip-off and what the icebreaker, I guess, for politics was seeing that book and me just pointing that out and saying, wow, Robert Bork book, huh? Interesting. And then that opened up this whole new world of conversation about politics and the history of America and the future of America. And me realizing, wow, my preconceived notions were not as spot on as I anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely, you learn a lot. I mean, you get a window into, what the person's about.
I never thought about how the Kindle has kind of ruined conversations, at least about books. And who knows what branches off of that.
Yeah, I was on the subway and this guy was reading the Jordan Peterson book. Was it 12 Rules for, I forget now. But and I had started reading it and I found it kind of boring. He tends to meander and he uses a lot of words. And at some point, I think I got a third of the way through, but I saw a guy on the subway. I'm like, oh, what do you think? He's like, yeah, I like it. And I could tell from, I'm like, yeah, but a lot of words, right? He's like, yeah, it takes a long time to get there,
Yeah. Word economy, practice it, or else I'm not going to get past chapter 1.
Cut that stuff down.
You've lived a very interesting life. You've crossed paths with a number of famous people. I do want to know how John Mayer screwed up your book launch. What happened there? What's that all about?
Oh, Johnny. So John. So when I lived in Atlanta, John was my intern for our recording studio. And not a very good one, but very fun. We had a good time. And we became friends and hung out. And then when I moved up to New York in 2001, and he moved around the same time. And so we'd see each other up here and go out to dinner and stuff. And cool. And then we maintained our friendship. And then my book was coming out in 2008, and it was being published by HarperCollins. And I had sent John a preview copy. And he texted me he was on a plane or something on the tarmac. He's like, I just finished your book. Love it. I want to help you promote it. And I'm like, oh, great. And I would never have asked for that. But he said, I want to help you promote the book. It's fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And I said, great. So I told HarperCollins. So HarperCollins, and he'd said, you have my word. That's the thing that really bothers me the most. He said, you have my word. I'll help you promote it. And we had come up with some great ideas where I might read and he might play guitar, but in the background of it, as I'm reading a chapter or whatever. When I told HarperCollins this, HarperCollins changed their whole promotion strategy because now they had, a celebrity promoting this guy's book. It's going to be, so they didn't really need to do much else. So as we got closer and closer to the deadline, this was back. Remember when you had the Apple chat and you could see when the other person was online? So I'd see he's online and I'd be like, hey, when should we get together to do this? And, and then he'd go offline and then I would send him emails and not get responses. And then we got closer and closer to the deadline. And then finally I called him and I didn't want to be annoying, but it was it was like, okay, you had given me your word. You said, they changed their whole marketing thing. And I called him and left a message and then I didn't hear from him. And then, the deadline came and went. HarperCollins the whole time would be like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I look like an idiot now. And then a couple of months later, he sends me an email just saying, give me a call. And I thought, you know what? You screwed me over. I'm not even going to, there's no apology in this email. It just says, give me a call. I'm like, no. And so that's the last I ever spoke to him.
Oh, man. Maybe he was wanting you to call so he could apologize and explain all the stuff he'd been going through. He's obviously had a lot of relationship issues in the past, and maybe he was just dealing with a lot of fires at once. I don't know.
I don't know, but that was, I'm if you give somebody your word, you don't do what he did. And without any kind of effort to apologize, I figured, you know what? I don't need someone like that in my life, even if it's fun to go out to dinner with them, because it's certainly fun to go out, dining with celebrities because, it's kind of, it's interesting, but it's also incredibly annoying. All the tables around you stop talking. And then, and then it's like mutter, and they're talking about you guys.
Yep.
You see people, I remember with this one dinner we had, and I could tell the woman right next to us could not wait to get into the conversation. She was just sitting there waiting for her moment. And then there was like a lull in our conversation, and she just leans over and she's like, I'm with Tommy Hilfiger. And anything you want, let me know. And hands him a business card. And I'm just like, son of a, that's not fair. Like you're rich, you're famous, and they're coming to you and saying, you want free clothing? Anything you want.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was hilarious. I think it would get tiresome after a while. You can't really have a normal dinner out.
So you worked for MTV, like an interview crew in the late 80s. You talk about how you've met a bunch of musicians. When I asked, any run-ins with famous people, I got to hear the story about how Hootie clogged your toilet.
Well, oh man. That's not, so the MTV, there was in the summer, in between junior and senior year of college, I went out to LA with my friend, and we worked for a company that contracted with MTV to go around doing interviews. And so we were schlepping around Los Angeles as part of an interview crew, and met a ton of musicians, and that was a lot of fun. But the Hootie story, that was just, I had a friend in Atlanta when I lived, and she worked for a record label, and I was going out of town, and she needed a place to stay, and she said, can I stay at your house? And I said, sure. And when I got back, she's like, I hope you don't mind, but I had my friend Hootie, or whatever his name, is it Darius Rucker or something?
Yep.
Yeah. I let my friend Darius stay here. He clogged your toilet, but I fixed it. And I was just like, what? He's like, yeah, Hootie clogged your toilet. I'm like, and you fixed it? He's like, yeah, he just kind of left it. I'm like, that's not good. Okay.
Oh no. No.
I'm like, don't do that. On. But she fixed it.
Oh, God.
But the interview crew was fun. That was, especially, I'm young, I'm in college, and we're going around, and we've got there's a Beastie Boys interview at 1:30. It was very fun. You'd come into the office in the morning and see the calendar and what was lined up for the week and everything, and see like Beastie Boys, 1:30, Capitol Records building. You're like, oh, cool.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Tell us about meeting Jack Lemmon.
Jack Lemmon. Oh, so this would have been when I was like teenager, and my father had a friend in Los Angeles, and at the time, this guy owned a restaurant called Ma Maison, and it was the hip place in LA. It was before Spago, which became the guy working in the kitchen was Wolfgang Puck. Uh-huh. And it was owned by this guy, Patrick. And Patrick was very savvy. He knew how to play these Hollywood celebrities. So he opened a restaurant that had no sign, no listing, no phone number publicly available. And of course, every celebrity wanted to go there, because you couldn't get in, you know what I mean? It was one of these places, like if you said you ate at Ma Maison, that meant like, wow, who do you know? And this Patrick was a good friend of my dad's, and said, my dad was going out to LA with me, and he said, well, come to Ma Maison, come to the restaurant. My dad says, great. We get to LA, and my father calls 411, asks for the number from Ma Maison, and is told there isn't one. It's unlisted. And my father doesn't know where the restaurant is. So being clever, he went to the fire department, and he asked the fireman, do you know where Ma Maison is? And they gave him the address. And so
Nice.
we go to the restaurant, we go in and just sat at a table, and then Patrick came over and sat with us, and we're talking. And as we were talking, it was just this parade of celebrities coming in to pay homage to Patrick, for his restaurant. And at one point, Jack, and I was a young kid, but I still recognized who Jack Lemmon was. And he came right over to the table and said, hey, Patrick. And Patrick said, oh, these are my friends, Brian and his dad. And then I remember Joanna Carson, who was Johnny Carson's wife, was there having a birthday party. Huh. And it was really, interesting. And the guy was a character. But,
that's really cool.
Yeah. And
yeah. So your earliest memory growing up, you got to tell us about a monster named Poo Poo Man.
Oh, Poo Poo Man. Yeah. I think I wrote about that in my book. My first book. I don't remember if I did. Poo Poo Man was so growing, I would have a nightmare every night, and I never made the connection. I was sleeping next to a radiator.
Yeah, that's a Northeastern thing. They're all over the place.
Yeah. And it was, it wasn't really, the temperature wasn't really controllable as far as I remember. So it was basically just full blast hot, but I was too young to really make the connection between incredibly hot and nightmares. So pretty much every night I had a dream that a man made out of poo-poo was going to come kill me. And he would always design these, it's a slide, but with daggers and axes on it that chops you up as you go down the slide. And my thing would always be like, well, can I say goodbye? I want to say bye to my mom. I want to, tell her I'm going to be killed. And they'd always be like, okay. And so I'd go and I'd try to tell my mom that, Poo Poo Man was trying to kill me, and I couldn't get the words out. I have no idea I'm sure there's some psychological reason for this dream. Uh-huh. And I couldn't get the words out. And meanwhile, Poo Poo Man's, creeping up, coming to get me. And then I'd wake up out of my nightmare. But it was a lot of Poo Poo Man dreams. So until that radiator went away. Yeah.
Oh my! And seriously, when the radiator was out of your life, then the Poo Poo Man dreams stopped?
Yeah, because it was related to heat. I mean, heat gives you nightmares. If you're too hot and you're sleeping, you have nightmares.
I have never known that, man.
Yeah, and I was literally lying next to this big source of heat, and never comfortable.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I have to have the room ice cold in order to sleep.
Yep. I love sleeping in a cold room.
Right. And so my wife's like, it's so cold. It's so cold. Now I can say, well, do you want nightmares?
Exactly. You want Poo Poo Man to come? If
you want Poo Poo Man in your dreams?
You don't want Poo Poo Man coming.
That's right. That's right. Now you have an embarrassing moment in your life that you can share with us, correct? I don't know if it's any more embarrassing than Hootie clogged your toilet. I mean, that
doesn't embarrass me. That embarrasses Hootie.
That's what I'm saying. Hootie, it's out there now. I mean, when this thing publishes, the world will know that you were a bad house guest. So, do you have a story? The
most embarrassing. I mean, the most recent embarrassing story, I guess, would be my kid's school likes to raise money.
Don't they all?
Yeah, and my feeling is like, well, I'm already paying money. Why do you need to raise money? I'm paying money. I feel like that should be enough. My wife forwarded me this email from this school, asking for, about donations and blah, blah, blah. And I got to the office first thing in the morning, and I saw the email that my wife had forwarded to me, and I responded. I said, well, don't you think we pay enough already? And anyways, some of that money would go towards the person they hired who has the ridiculous degree in grievance studies, the social justice person. And so it's being wasted. And why don't we just, pretend we're one of the anonymous donors? and I sent it to my wife. And so I get home that night and she goes, you never responded to my email.
Oh, no.
You know where this is going.
I have a feeling.
I'm like, of course I did. First thing I did when I opened up my computer and I saw the email, I responded. She's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yes, I did. No, you didn't. I was like, and I opened up my laptop and I'm like, it's right here. Oh my God. And I had sent it to the head of fundraising.
Oh no. Well, so, at least they know how you feel.
So my wife looks at me and I mean, if looks could kill, I'd be so incredibly dead. And she's like, what have you done? I'm like, I'm an idiot. She's like, you need to fix that.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah. So I, wrote to the head. I was like, I'm sorry. Obviously that email was intended for my wife and not for you. And she was very graceful. She responded she's like, absolutely. I understood that. I figured just as much. And then I'm just thinking, and my wife's like, you realize you're donating now, right? And I'm like, yes, I do.
God.
Yes, I do.
Oh.
And so we wound up attending the fundraiser, the school fundraiser. And man, that lady came right up to me with this giant grin on her face.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, it's good to put, it's good to finally meet you. I'm like, yeah.
It's good to meet the guy behind that big check.
The sucker.
Oh boy. That's
dummy.
a very funny. That's funny. I love this answer about if you could go back in history, who would you meet? Drinks with Churchill, Winston Churchill. That's a great, it's not only a great answer as far as Winston Churchill, but yes, drinks with Winston Churchill. That would be fun.
He liked his champagne.
Uh-huh.
His Paul Roger.
Would you ask him anything specific? Anything that you would want to ask Winston Churchill?
I think he's such an outsized character. Like I think just being in his presence would be fascinating.
Right.
The wit and the knowledge. I read one of his biographies that it's called The Last Lion, and to show just how incredible this guy's life was. It's like a 3-volume book. It's huge. There's just so much, but he's a fascinating character. And in some ways, there's tragic. Like when he was a kid, he just shipped off to private school and spent most of his time asking his mother if she was ever going to stop by.
Oh,
it was, very sad. Like it's very English actually. Just kind of like, okay, you're 8 years old. Goodbye. Go to this school now. Somebody else is going to teach you and raise you, and dad's going to run off and get syphilis. And mom is going to ignore you because she's a socialite.
And Churchill narrowly avoided death as a child multiple times. The guy is the definition of resiliency. One thing I can't understand, I just don't understand how not only did Britain turn their back on him before World War II, before he became prime minister, but it's like immediately after. I've never understood that dynamic between him and the British people, of how for that moment in time, maybe it was divinely inspired, but for whatever reason, just for those years of World War II, did it seem, from my perspective, that Britain appreciated what they had.
Yeah, he was the man of the hour for an hour. And then it was kind of like,
exactly.
Yeah. And then it was, okay, thanks for your service.
So you're into sharpshooting.
Yeah, I'm a good shooter.
Is that something you can actually do and participate in, an activity that's allowed in the state of New York?
Not in the city, in the state. If you get outside of city limits, the city has very restrictive laws on guns to the point where one time when we were shooting a sketch for the BS of A, so let's say 2012 or 2013, and I was dressed as a cop and I had basically a BB gun in my holster. And when you're shooting anything in New York and if you're dressed as a police officer, you have to have someone from the New York City Police Department's film unit on the set.
Okay.
So it's an actual uniformed officer who will go with you and be on the set and just make sure there's no confusion between, you being dressed as a cop and being treated like a cop. It's a sensible requirement. So we had this cop on the set, and we were standing there between takes, and he looks over at my gun in my holster. He's like, what's that? I'm like, oh, it's just my prop gun. He's like, what is it? I'm like, it's a BB gun. And he goes, can I see it? I said, sure. So I take it out of the holster, and of course I hand it to him very, very carefully and hand him the BB gun. And he looks at it and he goes, I'm supposed to arrest you for this.
What?
Yeah. And I said, what? It's a BB gun. He goes, I know. It's treated as a firearm. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, no. He goes, they're illegal. And he goes, do yourself a favor. He's like, put it back in the holster and then get that out of the city. And I was like, okie doke. So yeah, they're very, very.
Were you
restricted.
able to finish the scene?
Oh yeah. No. The guy was super cool. He just let me know that it was not legal and that I was totally breaking the law, and just to get it out of the city. And no, he was great. Like he actually took us for a ride in the cop car, and that was fun. People get out of your way. And there's something that's very empowering. You're like, man, this is awesome. They're just getting out of the way. And then we got out and we walked into a deli, and I'm like, people think I'm a cop.
Well, not if they makes you take the gun out of your holster. They'll be like, well, where's your weapon, man?
Yeah.
Okay. I like this because it's such an unusual fun fact of something people don't know about you, but at the same time, it creeps me out because my biggest fear is spiders. But yet you wrote you'll spend 20 minutes trying to save a spider. What is your problem, man?
I don't know. I have a soft spot for animals and insects.
And insects?
Yeah, I mean, depends. I mean, if you bite me, I hate ticks. Like I've had Lyme disease 3 times.
No.
And ehrlichiosis 1 time. And I hate ticks. I will kill ticks the minute I see them. But yeah, I will spend a lot of time getting, spiders and stink bugs out of the house. My wife is more I'm gonna kill it. You have 10 seconds. I'm like, no. And I'll scoop it up and get it out. Yeah. And I love animals. I feed chipmunks in the summertime. They'll actually eat out of my hand and climb on me.
Aw.
I feed birdies.
Are you like Snow White? I'm
like Snow White. I'm not as pretty. My skin's not as porcelain.
Pretty, but, I mean, didn't she like sit around and like animals, or was that Cinderella? Some Disney princess.
Yeah, they came running up to her,
hanging out with her. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I just don't. I feel like if you don't have to kill it, don't kill it.
Right. Okay. Well, let's analyze this, if we may. You said, look, if you bite me, then I'm going to kill you, right? Well, if a spider bites you, that could have bad repercussions for you.
But they really don't.
Why even wait?
I don't know, because they're scared of you.
Brown
they don't
recluse?
Really want to. Well, I don't see those.
Would you carry a brown recluse out of your house?
Probably. Although I almost killed my son because we were in Poland with my wife's family, and mushroom hunting is a big thing in the woods there, and I really enjoy it. It's very fun and therapeutic. And but you're walking through the woods, and you do have these spiders will set up huge webs between trees.
I know,
which are very unpleasant. And one time my son was very young, and we were in the woods looking for mushrooms, and I had him on my shoulders because he had gotten tired of walking, and I walked into the biggest spider web. And I basically threw my son off, like into the just this panicked reaction when the spider web went across my face, and I dropped my son, and it was like and he's like ah, and I'm pulling spider webs off of me and terrified, like, where's the spider? I need to know where it is. And but I almost smashed his face into the ground out of terror.
How old was he?
Oh, he was probably like 4 or 5.
Oh man, is he traumatized by that?
He wasn't injured or anything. It just scared him. But it was just like I could have easily just like thrown him.
Well, you mentioned stink bugs. When we lived in New Jersey, we had window units for air conditioning. So the gaps around them.
Yep.
That's where the stink bugs come in, and then they go up high and they hide behind stuff that you have on the wall. I mean, they are freaks. I read where they actually arrived in the United States from Asia on a cargo plane that landed at Allentown Airport in Pennsylvania.
Really? Oh, interesting.
About 20 years ago, and they've been migrating basically southward ever since, which would make sense if they're from a more warm and humid climate. But I hate those things. And the trick to killing those without having your hand or your house smell like a stink bug, because if people aren't familiar, if they feel threatened, they'll spray.
I didn't know that, actually. So that's why they're called stink bugs. That makes sense.
Yeah, that stench is so nasty. And so I got it down to a science where if I would find the stink bug in my house, which we did literally every day during the warm months, you gotta somehow gradually get it into your hand without it feeling threatened. And it sounds like a lot of trouble, but this is the only way to do this. Because if you put them outside, they'll come back in. So what you do is you carry it. I'm going to sound like probably going to get, PETA on me. You take it, because if you flush it, it comes right back up. I mean, these guys are jerks. And so what you do is you slam it down in the bathtub, it knocks it unconscious, then you pick it up and you put it in the toilet and flush it, and it never comes back, because by then it's knocked out, you see.
God, I was never terrified of stink bugs, but now you've kind of freaked me out.
First of all, you got to make sure you don't threaten them, then knock them out, then flush them away. So
I just get them to walk on a piece of paper. I'll kind of coax them onto a piece of paper and then put them outside.
Aren't you a sweetheart?
Where they'll probably freeze to death, which is kind of
like, there you go. There you go.
At least I didn't do it. Nature did it.
So speaking of insects,
yes,
you ate grub worms in Namibia. So what was that like?
Kind of gross. I mean, it's kind of you have to kind of get your head around the fact you're eating this very large thing that looks like a maggot.
Oh, why'd you do that, man? Were you bored? What was the deal?
It's a lesson for the kids because we when when in Rome kind of thing. It is a thing that they eat in Namibia. They do them either dried like chips, or they do them cooked. The one we had was cooked, and
Okay.
they're smushy, and you realize you're eating this giant grub worm. I think it's a moth, or it would have been a moth if I didn't eat it. But so so yeah, not the most delicious thing, but it was one of these things. Okay, we're in Namibia. We most likely won't be here again. So why not try it? And I got my the younger son tried it. My wife and older son would not go near it.
Well, I'm on team not try.
But now I can say I had a grub worm. And it didn't kill me. I mean, they eat them there. It's a snack, and it's got a lot of protein, and it's very cheap to produce because it's basically like maggots. And how those are very plentiful.
I'm going to go without the protein, I think. But,
you do what you have to do. Namibia's, it's a poor country, so.
Yeah.
Because we were in a shanty town, and we saw somebody, no electricity, and saw somebody rolling a 55-gallon drum down the dirt road, and that was water. That's so they fill their 55-gallon drum and they roll the thing back to their house that does not have electricity, and I point that out to the kids and said, so next time the Xbox doesn't work, don't complain.
Right. It's a different world completely.
It is
something it's hard to even fathom
in a lot of the world. I mean, the squalor, the levels of squalor that I saw, especially in China and Cambodia and Vietnam and also in Namibia, it's staggering.
What got you to these places? You're quite traveled.
We love to traveling is, my wife and I love traveling, and it is the most educational thing you can do, for yourself and also for kids, and because my wife is from Poland and we have family in Poland, we've been in Poland a lot. And then since we're in Poland, I have friends from Ireland, so we'll meet in France. We've driven across Europe multiple times. So, we've, and it became, okay, well, we've seen most of Europe just from driving through it. And, there were these other countries we'd never seen. So we, went to Peru, and that was fascinating. And you really, I think it's great for the kids to see, how the world is outside of the U.S. And it really makes you appreciate what you have in the U.S. Because we do have it so incredibly easy. Namibia being a perfect example, just in China where you have, people sharing a whole block, sharing a public bathroom. And I can still smell, this incredible poverty. That's like nothing we have in the States.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm disappointed that, my kids were going to go help build houses in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Back last year. But of course, COVID came and destroyed that opportunity. And hopefully something will come up again where they can, like you said, experience firsthand what it's like in the rest of the world.
Well, my oldest is actually, he's going, as long as COVID doesn't throw it for a loop, he's going to Japan and he'll be gone for a year. He's going to go to high school. They have high school during the summer. They don't take a summer break. So he'd be starting high school and spend a whole year in a Japanese high school, total immersion. It sounds amazing. It was all his idea. He found this organization that does that. They put you in high schools around the world, and he chose Japan because he's very interested in Japanese culture.
Very cool. I hope that happens for him.
Me too. At first we were like, no, I don't want you to be gone for a year. He's 16 years old, but now, we're kind of like, if it doesn't happen, we'll be very disappointed because he's really looking forward to it. He's been learning Japanese. That's got to be an amazing experience, especially for a guy who's 6'3". He's gonna be the tallest guy in Japan.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
I want to see pictures of him standing with his friends at that school if he's able to get there. That's awesome.
He'll be a rock star. I remember when my wife and I were in China, and she's blonde, and that is unusual there. Everybody there has black hair. Everybody there is Chinese, and they, most of those people never, see Westerners. And so we'd go to places and people would come up and take pictures. They'd stand next to her and not say anything. They'd just walk up, stand next to her, and then the friend would take a quick picture. Every once in a while they'd ask. And sometimes, and it was hilarious. Like, you're so unusual there.
I love your answer when I said if you could do something that you knew you couldn't fail at, you'd say you'd build a time machine. That's pretty awesome. Would you go back to see Winston Churchill at a pub or something?
Right after I killed Hitler.
There you go.
Or no,
there you go.
I wouldn't kill him. I would just go back to his art school admissions folks and be like, listen, you got to let this guy into art school. Otherwise, things are going to go south.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Then you'd meet up for drinks with Winston, who warned Europe of what was coming from Hitler.
Yes,
and he'd be Hitler, like, what are you talking about, man? I'm trying to enjoy my cigar.
You're right. He'd have had he wouldn't be a hero like he is. Yeah, that's hilarious. So
you got to be careful how you're going to mess up time. Come on.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, you could just make things worse.
Yeah.
Although I think killing Hitler's probably a decent.
Although I think that's the safe. I think you're in a safe zone there as far as it getting worse.
Stalin, Mao. I think fair enough. You could probably get rid of those guys and be doing a favor.
I think you're safe choosing to take one of those guys out.
Although it would be terrible. Okay. It's like, oh no, now you've unleashed Super Hitler.
Right. So my last question for you here, and I've really enjoyed our time together. Thanks for making it for us, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. You wish that you had been a Marine. That's very interesting.
My wife will always say, well, then you wouldn't have met me and you wouldn't have your kids. I'm like, yeah, I get that part. But like I do, I went to a Marine Corps boot camp when I was a kid, when I was like 13. My dad basically was like, what are you doing with your summer? I'm like, I don't know. I'm, 13. and he's like, well, you can't sit around the house. I'm going to send you to this boot camp unless you find something to do. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take him up on this. So I wound up going to Marine Military Academy in Harlingen, Texas, down at the low point, like right near Mexico.
Yeah.
And I actually really enjoyed it. I think that kind of, especially for me who has like ADHD, it was a very, very good experience for the structure and just every minute being accounted for. There was no chance for my mind to wander. It was 6 o'clock, get out of rack, physical exercise, jog to breakfast. That marching, close order drill hours, classes. Everything was accounted, and then 10 o'clock lights out, and you're asleep in seconds because you're so exhausted.
Right, no kidding.
And my father had been a Marine, and I was always kind of fascinated by it. And I just, I was 18 and I could have gone to the Marines or I could have gone to college. And I decided to go to college. I think the Marine Corps would have been very good for me maturity wise. It would have helped. I think I would have grown up a lot because I was very immature.
Would you have been a sharpshooter or something like that? Was that a trait? Was that a skill that you had before adulthood or? No,
I mean, the first time I shot rifles was when I went to the Marine Corps Military Academy. Yeah. My dad had a couple of Lee Enfield rifles. British rifles from the First World War. But he kind of just had those, they didn't shoot. I mean, you can buy ammo for them. But I hadn't really shot. I mean, I started at the camp. It was the first time I was at 22.
Wow. That's, who knows, man? I mean, you take a different path, who knows? But your wife's right. You wouldn't have had her.
Right. She's always like, what are you talking about? You wouldn't have met me. You wouldn't have had your kids. I'm like, yeah, I know. But I'd have the dress blues.
Yeah. You would like to live on a cruise ship for how long? I mean, there were some people that actually had to because of COVID. For months, they were stuck on ships. And that's something you actually want to do?
Oh, my. We took a cruise and there was a lady on the ship who lived on the ship.
Really? That's a thing?
That's a thing. I mean, if you have the money for it, I mean, it has to be phenomenally expensive. But she lived on the ship and we were asking all the crew. The crew knew her because she lived on the ship, and we're asking like, so what? What if she has to go to a wedding? Well, she gets off at whatever port and then flies to wherever the wedding is, and then rejoins the ship at a different port.
Right.
I'm like, doesn't she get bored? It's like, no, she has people around all the time. She can visit. She's been all over the world, God knows how many times, and has seen everywhere. And, when you're hungry, you go downstairs, and there's
someone cooks for you.
Somebody makes you, and there's always, it was very interesting. I mean, that was fascinating. There was, really interesting cast of characters on these things because there was clearly like this shady Russian. It's the best way I can describe him is some this Russian and his wife, who was a very ostentatious but vulgar lady. Like just overdid everything. Clearly wanted people to know she had money. They had, and was but like a shady. Like there was all these different people I met on that thing. But she was the one who really was like, man, I'd love to live on a cruise ship. And not now. I mean, like when you're just older and you just kind of living on a ship, and there's something nice about cruise, like that vibration of the engine that kind of lulls you to sleep. And as long as you're not in a horrible storm where the ship's rocking back and forth.
Yeah, but, that could be a problem.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a nice way to retire, but it has to be incredibly expensive.
Right. You're going to have to buy more shares of Tesla.
Yeah, exactly. Two's not going to cut it.
No. Okay. So anything that we haven't covered that you would like to throw in there for us, or have we pretty much run the gamut of Brian Sack here?
You
covered a lot of ground, right?
Yeah.
All right. People can find you on Twitter.
Brian _Sack. And then our questionable material with Jack and Brian at qmpodcast.com or Apple, Spotify, etc. And that's just Jack and I being silly. And
seriously, that's all it is.
Just telling you, entertaining one another.
Entertaining each other and then sharing that entertainment with the rest of the world.
And it's a really fun creative outlet to have. I mean, I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been enjoyable and it's fun to watch it grow and the audience grow and get comments and see the reviews and get emails from people. It's really fun because I miss that from the BS of A days. Like I miss, that kind of feedback and the entertainment thing.
Well, go and follow him, Brian Sack, at Brian _Sack on Twitter. And don't forget the letter Q, the letter M, podcast.com for questionable material. Brian Sack, you're awesome, dude. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Keith.
That was a lot of fun getting to chat with Brian. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. Also hope you'll check out his podcast with Jack Helmuth, Questionable Material, over at qmpodcast.com. Very funny stuff. Next time we get together here on At the Mic, I'll be sitting down with Steve Krakauer from The Megyn Kelly Show. He and I had a great conversation, which I hope that you will check out next week. In the meantime, please head over to atthemicshow.com, catch up on any episodes you may have missed. There's sponsor information there, and of course, there are ways to contact us as well. Please rate, review, and share this podcast with anyone you know who may be interested in some fun conversations. Until next time, thank you again for being a part of At the Mic.
This has been At the Mic with Keith, an independent podcast production. Head to atthemicshow.com for archived episodes, sponsor information, and ways to connect.